I'm psychologist Dr. Bryan Violet, and today I'll be sitting down with Donal Kearney. That's Donal, like donut, without the D at the end. It's Irish. We'll be talking about his perspective on American culture and the United States based on his time here. We'll also be talking about his experience in the pub, the Irish pub, and life at the bar. Also, his experience with the Catholic faith growing up and how things have changed based on his later experiences. And finally, we'll be talking about our sinner in the movie, his choice, Miller's Crossing. This is the Catholic Sinner Show. Donal. Donal.
Donal. Nice to meet you, Dr. Bryan. How are you?
I'm overjoyed to be with you today. I know, of course, I work with your wife, and she's told me about you at different times, and what first one caused me to want to talk to you about your life and your interests were some of your thoughts on religion, at least conveyed to me through your wife. So, but we'll get to that. The first thing I want to talk about is the elephant in the room, is that you're not American.
You know what? I am actually an American citizen. Thanks to my wife. I'm a dual citizen. It's a rare thing throughout this world. Ireland can apply for an Irish passport and an American passport if you're lucky enough to be married to an American woman or man.
That's brilliant. I have a friend I want to talk to you about Irish culture and American culture and some of the differences that you've noticed over the years.
Yeah.
I know you've been back and forth between your home now what's the name of your village area?
County Carlow. I like to think of it as the Beverly Hills of Ireland, but it's down here in the southeast. We're about an hour south of Dublin. Not everybody's heard of us, but we're small, but we're useful,
Right. So your experience has gone from the Beverly Hills of Ireland to all the way up to the big city, one of the biggest cities in New York City.
Yeah.
And steeped in American culture. Your name is Donal. Your wife told me a story one time that about how she didn't actually know your name for a while. She thought it was Donald, and they left the D off. Yeah. And then someone, I think, was it you that had to correct her?
Yeah, it was, Trina, she's so nice. I didn't want to, it didn't bother me that much. But, the running joke I used to explain to people, when I worked in New York in particular, was, what's your name? And I go, Donal, go, Donald, Donald. I'd say, no, sorry, let me make it easy. It's Donald without the D. And to go, Arnold. So I go, not the other D. So I used to get teased. My cousin Marguerite used to call me Arnold all the time, so that was
yes. So what does the name mean?
Means the ruler of wise men, actually. So I was named after a priest, as you do in Ireland. So I never met Father Donal. I had a Father Donal as a teacher in secondary school, all right. But yeah, it means people will pronounce your name wrong outside of Ireland. That's exactly what it means.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get all the American stereotypes out of the way, and you can correct me. I had a friend who's a bit of a troll. He's from Belfast, and he I told him that you're coming on the show, and he said, make sure you open the interview with "top of the morning to you." And I said, I'm not that Irish. I mean, I'm not that American. Like I know not to say that. He told me he was at a bar in Chicago and he had everyone in the bar convinced that leprechauns were real.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. So what are some of the misconceptions you think that Americans have about the Irish?
You know what? It really depends in where in America too. Like there's obviously parts of America that I've never even heard of Ireland, but I think that they have that Darby O'Gill vision of us, which funny enough, the Rock of Dunamaze is right beside us here. It's a great tourist attraction when you do come over. But a lot of people just grew up with that stereotype that we're all a little bit, shanty people,
Yeah.
But we kind of play into it too. So it's a two-way street, to be honest.
Yes. Yes. Why do you think the Irish play into the stereotypes and you
'Cause
see
we
this in
don't.
different you see good. Sorry.
Wait, well, I'll give you an example now. Maybe it's not a great one, but you know the way the fighting Irish had that little leprechaun up there. You know,
Sure.
he's, you know, we don't take offense at all that stuff. It just doesn't
No.
bother us. Where the movement in America has gone very politically correct, and you can't say anything about a certain race or this, that, and the other. But we see a little leprechaun. It personally it doesn't bother me, but we're a very advanced country. Like we're leading
Oh
in
yeah.
IT. We're highly educated. So little things like that. We're like, couldn't really care less, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Life's too short to get caught up in all that stuff.
I think that's wonderful. I there are a lot of Irish
Plus
Americans.
they're
I
real.
mean,
Sorry.
what's that?
Plus they're real. The leprechauns.
Leprechauns are real.
Yeah. They're,
Have you
they're
caught
mainly
any?
from the county over. Belfast, I think they're mainly from. Your friend must know if you're up there.
You must know. Well, I don't. The thing that makes me doubt that is I know that he hasn't had any wishes granted.
I bet he
I know
wished
he.
he got out of Belfast.
At times, it can be a dangerous place, from what I understand.
That's brilliant.
Belfast.
I love
Yeah.
it. It's up there, yeah.
Okay. Good. So there are a lot of Irish Americans. I mean, I think there is a real Irish pride here, at least in where I am from in the northeastern United States. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of the Irish folk that came over here and basically stayed and mingled. The Irish and the Italians tend to line up well
Oh, yeah.
for some reason. They marry here,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering if now I don't know if this is an Irish American thing or this is an Irish thing, and I know it's pronounced Irish, right? It's not Irish.
Yeah, Irish. We got a lot of different dialects here, but Irish, yeah. Heavy on the Irish.
Irish, okay,
Yeah.
sure. Well, one thing I've noticed is that you have a lot of Irish Americans marrying Italian Americans,
Mm.
and in some ways, there's a complementarity between the flash, emotionality, dramatics,
Mm.
emotional expression of the Italian American
Yeah.
and the more reserved, sort of stoic,
That's the word I was going for, stoic, yeah.
stoic Irish presentation. But you also hear that related to that Irish presentation is that it's common culturally to sort of stuff your feelings down
Yeah. Yeah.
unless you're drinking.
So then we just opened the floodgates. But
Is it true?
even with the drink part, especially in the countryside, they don't get over emotional. We weren't brought up to be emotional people. Like it took me, especially going over to Americans, the hugging and the, bringing it in and love you, and
Yeah.
there's an openness over there. And my personality, I love that. Like people look at me over here, when I came back first, at the big handshake and the bro hug, and they're like, no, pull it back. And I'm like, okay, but we don't live by our emotions. Like we grew up with that. Like I grew up. There's 5 in my family. Grew up on a farm. There was never. We never talked about feelings or emotions, or it was very much, all right, get up, get on, get over it, move on, and that's
Yeah.
across the board. Like, and there was, there wasn't that there wasn't love there. There was nothing but love, but it was just, it was very much unexpressed. I think it's
Mm.
just across the board here. Very, very cultural. Same with the Italian; they're very expressive. Like that's why I think
Yeah.
the yin and the yang, they absolutely get on really well together because of that. It's needed.
Yeah. And I think almost one side admires that quality in the other.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I can't be that way myself, but I appreciate it and I value it. And I wish, I wish I could control my emotions a little better on the Italian side, and
Mhm.
I wish I could show love a little bit more on the Irish side.
Yeah, it's a balance, isn't it? You take uh, like Trina is even more stoic than I am. She's very, extremely level headed and paced. So I'd be a lot more emotional on that side. And, I feed off it. She helps me to bring that back a small bit, which is, you just need that in your life. There's no point in two
So you
emotional people going crazy.
so you married an American woman
Yes.
that is much like an Irish woman.
Unbelievably so. Yeah, very the most Floridian I think ever existed.
Yeah.
Loves the sun, loves everything about it. But culturally, she's much more Irish than I think American, and she just like a fish out of water when we moved over here. There was never a thought of moving back. I would have moved back a lot quicker than she would.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So when are the times where you see the American side of her, and you think to yourself, that's not, maybe not so much now, but maybe in the early parts of your relationship, maybe still, do you see her American culture show up very often, or not so much?
Okay. You know what? Say we celebrate all the traditions. She's very much an American living in Ireland. Kind of, she'd stand out a little bit. She just looks a bit different. But the American side is one of the greatest qualities out there of America, and it's the part I miss most. Is that not a whole lot phases Americans. They think big. There's always a solution. No
Hmm.
problem is unsolvable.
Hmm.
It's a real comfort to see that mindset. And it's a pure growth mindset, and I think it's probably something we struggle with in Ireland a bit.
More
So
of like a depressive attitude, a defeatism in
eh,
Irish culture.
probably the depressive is the wrong word I feel, but little bit of the lack of little bit of big thought process. It's a small enough country. There's 5 million people here now, so
Yeah.
we have a very much a shared connection across the country. Whether it's through religion or sports, but we also have a shared mentality. So it's hard for people to move above that, and the structure here isn't as free flowing from a business side of point of view either. A lot of people work
Ah.
within the government, let's say, or are part of the system, which I'm not saying is good or bad or in between, but it's just it's a different mentality. It doesn't lend itself to entrepreneurship and growth.
Yeah.
You know,
So maybe then it's the insulated nature. I mean, it's an island.
yeah, it's an island. It's an island that that has as one generation from the conflict in the north, and few generations removed from the famine. And like I grew up in the '80s, nobody had money. We didn't know any better. It didn't matter. Just nobody had
Yeah.
money. That's why of this generation in the '80s in particular, there was a lot of people immigrated to England and Australia and the US. I went over in the '90s, and Ireland really only became a economic power in the '90s.
Hmm.
So there's a kind of a real conservatism in Ireland.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah. That makes sense. Um, Something that you had mentioned to me. Well, maybe talk a little bit about what your first experience was like coming to the United States, coming from, uh, you know, actually, let me go a different direction. I think there's something beautiful about the Irish culture. Anytime I ever speak to anyone who goes to visit, they can't help but remark on the openness, the friendliness, the beautiful simplicity of the culture and the people there, the warm and welcoming. Everything's it's small. It's a small island, but everything feels very open. That the doors and windows are unlocked. It's an open countryside. So in a smaller place, there's more openness.
yeah, it's the one thing I often know, see, the first thing you go through the airport, when you're going over to the States and you meet the security, the immigration, the whole, it's very, where are your papers? This is where it is, it's almost aggressive in its nature, where you land in the airport in Ireland, it's like, yeah, that's all right. They're very kind of, how can,
Come on in.
yeah, how can we help you? That's not a big deal. Where if you're that going through the airport is a little bit of a DMV experience where you're in there, you're just a number, you're really,
Yeah.
they dehumanize a lot of stuff in the States, which is unfortunate. On the
Yeah.
plus side, there is you go to the supermarket, they're so friendly. You go to a restaurant, in general, they're very, very friendly, and have a nice day. Nobody will say have a nice day in Ireland, but
What do they say and say? Have a terrible day? What?
I just wouldn't say it. It's like, I guess they
Yeah.
assume you're going to have a nice day. You don't have to be told it. We live in Ireland.
You
That's
don't have
all
to
I'm going
hope
to
for it. That's funny.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. So the other thing is, you realize it's not quite as modern as you had it built up in your own mind. But yeah, like a lot of the world is caught up and surpassed American infrastructure and things like that. But it's the sheer size, the sheer scale, the sheer consumerism of it. Like, I love it. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
I get that feeling when I fly back in. I just such excitement because anything is possible. It's probably the only place in the world where anything is still possible. And I think
Yeah.
Americans have forgotten that, which is heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a few things. Number one, it's very interesting for me to hear that American modernism isn't quite the way it's portrayed. I mean, I do definitely have a sense that we are an advanced country, like ahead of others. And but just your experience, just walking around Europe, I haven't been there, but it seems that Europe has caught up and moved past it in terms of architecture. We have a lot of older buildings. I mean, not old buildings, not
Yeah,
European old, but 20th century buildings.
correct. Yeah, and a lot of the infrastructure, the highways, like it's just sheer volume to keep up with what's going on over there, But when they do, I remember when I
Yeah,
landed first, I had a cell phone in Ireland, and when I went to
yeah,
the States, they didn't. It was a rare thing. I remember having to go down to run down to the corner of the street into the phone box. Remember the old phone box? I'd go into the little bidet room and buy
yeah,
the,
yeah,
the call card with the 17 digits that you'd have to try call back home on. You scratch it off and
yeah,
get a digit wrong and you're out
yeah.
there.
Very
And,
inconvenient.
wow, they don't have cell
Yeah,
phones here. But then the other side of it was when they decided to roll out the infrastructure, it was immediate. They didn't bring it, so
yeah.
they rolled out across the entire state. So when they did decide to push forward, it was phenomenal. Yeah,
It happened. Yeah, the American
it's
industriousness.
it's
Yeah,
it's so good. It's so good.
yeah. I'm also interested in what you said about how anything is
Mm.
possible
Yeah,
here, and that's unique. I think that's built on the foundation of the American dream, right? There was this long term
mm.
narrative here about the American dream where anyone could be anything and there are
Yeah,
no limitations. In many ways we've lost that narrative, and there's a tremendous
yeah,
pushback which emphasizes that it's actually
yeah.
not possible for everyone, or it's only possible for a certain demographic, and that the structures in the United States are built such that it only allows for upward
Mm.
mobility for a small portion, and it's not everything isn't possible for
And,
everyone in America. I'm thinking of minorities. I'm thinking of women. I'm thinking of I mean, whatever
yeah.
kind of socioeconomic limitations are placed upon you depending on where you live in the nation. But is that communicated to the world that that's a tension right now in the United States, that the American dream as an idea is being
Yeah,
threatened?
I think it is, and sadly, some people are loving it. I hate it. I think I think there's the divide in America is ridiculously large between uber wealthy and very poor. And
Yeah.
that is in South Florida was always just struck me. Within a very small space, you have your mega yachts, super mansions. People don't live there year round in those mansions because they have the money not to. Have somebody else driving the yachts. And less than a kilometer away, you have poverty. And how there isn't more of a clash. I never really
Yeah.
understood, but
Sometimes it's right down the
right
street,
down,
isn't it?
it's
You have
literally
mansions and then,
you
yeah.
could turn left and you could turn right, and you're in day and night. It's really mind blowing. I think that's a very frustrating thing. Like as I say, I grew up in Ireland in the '80s, and there was nobody had anything. When nobody has anything, that's fine. You're growing up in that environment that, it's okay. But when
Yeah.
you're looking at your neighbor across the road with so much and you just can't even get a job or you can't go down, that's very
Yeah.
frustrating. But the American dream, I still think, is there. But you might have to
Yeah.
curb your expectations from the yacht. Okay, to having a nice car, to have, the standard.
Wait a minute. You're bursting my bubble. I want the
You
yacht.
want the second yacht, isn't it?
I, sure. I'll settle for a rowboat.
So that's I still believe in it, and I still think it's there. Your expectations are might have to be
Yeah.
culled a small bit, but the consumerism in America,
Yeah.
like one of the things when I moved back home, I really, when I lived there, if I wanted something, click click Amazon. So every day there was another package, but I felt I needed so much more than I needed, and it took
Mm.
me about
That's the
the
marketing here,
marketing,
probably,
and
isn't it?
it's so
Yeah.
good. It sucks you in, so you don't think you're getting sucked in, but you're absolutely into. You need this. Oh, I need because for the keyboard, I need a light here, and you just buying, and
Ergonomic
it's
keyboard.
everything.
Yeah.
And you get back
Everything.
here,
Yeah.
and that stuff just isn't as available. So you're like, oh, what?
Yeah. Well, I think the affluence here, uh, just the extra money, um, the income that is
Yeah,
expendable, um, is basically directed towards making one's life more
correct.
convenient. And so products are created to make your
Yeah.
life more convenient. So because of the extra money, the products are created, and then the marketers tell you you need this, when in fact we don't need it. But it's a circular kind of feedback
It
loop, I
is,
think.
I'm not, and there's zero judgment. There's not good, there's not bad. I believe
Yeah,
if you're in a position and you need something that's going to make your life better, and you're not harming another person, absolutely. And it keeps the
sure.
world moving. Like this is economics. This is every time I buy something, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, this is great. I'm helping somebody else. I'm creating
Hmm.
part of the economy. I love that. We all sat back.
I need to think that way. I need to think that way, especially about my wife's purchases. This is great. We're helping people.
It's less exciting when it comes true for the wife. I have to admit.
Yes, yes. um, that's great. It struck me too, though, when you were saying, we were talking about how uh, there's this stark contrast between, in the United States, of the affluent and the poor, almost living in adjoining neighborhoods, and there's no sort of, in Ireland, there's no gradation. It's very difficult to find a middle class space
Yeah,
between the two, oftentimes, and you said so. There's less sort of space for tension over those kinds of issues, so socioeconomic issues
yeah,
in Ireland. You grew up, everybody had nothing. However, what comes to my mind is, I mean, there's the fallen nature of being human, and we'll find something to be contentious over. And what comes to my mind in terms of Ireland, and you can tell me how serious of an issue it is tension over
mm,
faith, and the conflict between essentially what is a Protestant
yeah,
sect and a
yeah.
Catholic sect, and as a result, there's real dangerous terrorism. Now, I don't know if it's still that way. have you lived under the shadow of that? Can
Yeah.
you say something about the religious tensions and the associated violence?
Yeah, and it would be a lot more up in Northern Ireland and the border counties than down here. Like I grew up through the Troubles, and we would have had very strong feelings about the UK, the English, everything about it. But on the other side, I have very good Protestant friends, and in
Yeah,
the area I grew up with, like I'm from a farming background. Our neighbours are Protestant farmers, and the village we're from
yeah,
is a
yeah,
Protestant church. The Catholic church is the next village over, which we go to, which is part of our village. But the majority of people
yeah,
here are, Catholic by a country mile. Like the violence and the things and the sectarianism, that wasn't around. Like it was more there than in the area I was growing up. But I have a lot of stories from a lot of friends that would be more qualified to speak on it than I would. That grew up like we grew up
sure.
very much, hand in hand, you know, with our neighbours. Was never discussed.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, speaking of terrorism, like what a segue that is, right? Speaking, no, I don't mean to make light of it, but I mean I think it was quite the shell shock for Americans, quite the
Mm.
wake up call when we had a terrorist act committed by as an organization that was not American. We have Al Qaeda uh, in at, in 2001 on
Yeah,
September the 11th, and you had mentioned to me that you were in New York at
yeah,
that time. What can you say about that experience? What was that like for you? What was
yeah.
the what was in the air? What was it
It
frightening? What
was,
was it like?
uncertainty is always frightening. And I distinctly remember,
Yeah.
I brushed on it before where, it was before the age of mass, internet. We didn't have phones, we didn't have internet, and I had just moved into a new apartment, and I worked nights as a bartender. Woke up the next morning, and I literally had a mattress on the floor, curtain, the towels over the windows as curtains, and my flatmate.
Like a
Yeah,
strip
it was
mall.
great. You think you've nothing back then, but you've everything because you got a lot less worries or whatever. But you
Mo money, mo problems.
fact. Well, I'm learning the facts. But Porrick, who I shared the apartment with, we got up and I said, Porrick, this is a bad neighborhood we're after moving into here. You hear the sirens, you hear the explosions. Like I don't know if I dreamt it, but I'm not sure about this neighborhood. He says, yeah, it's nice. So we walked outside the door, and our neighbor Frank was in the patio. Frank was in his 70s, and he's like crying his eyes out. He's like, the knock the towers. What are you talking about? The knock the towers, Frank? I said, oh, look at the TV. So this is crazy. This is 10:30, 11 in the morning now. And as we're walking out into
Yeah, I
the
remember.
road,
Yeah.
we like see the F-16 fighter just whoa, whoa. This is different. We walk up the Queens Boulevard. Of course, there's tens and tens of thousands of people walking on the boulevard. Just everybody is shell shocked. I worked in the city in a place called Connolly's on 47 between 5th and Madison, which is right around the corner from St. Patrick's Cathedral. And we had a lot of people that, would have worked in the financial trade, a lot of cops, a lot of firefighters as well. So I travelled into the city that night and went in on the 7 train. And like it was such a surreal experience just to see no towers. You just seen smoke, and I got out at Grand Central Station, and the army was everywhere, walking up, Fifth Avenue there. They had, there was no traffic, and it was just Hummers and army vehicles into the bar that night. Everybody's just, there's only people left on the island that were stuck on the island, and us service workers
Yeah, people
trying
trying to
to
get
get
off.
off, people stuck in hotels, but like you were just looking around. Like I remember, I went in at 6 o'clock, worked till 2 o'clock in the morning. Just nobody really spoke. It was just TVs were on. Nobody knew who was alive, who was dead. There was no communication. We didn't know. It
Traumatic.
was it was so surreal. Like we're fully expecting more attacks. Like we were thinking, well, they were so successful with that. Like
Yeah.
surely they'll take out the bridges, the tunnels. This is
It felt like a
it
movie almost, huh?
really, really was. And the next couple of months, because we were beside St. Patrick's Cathedral, were equally surreal because all the funerals of the firefighters were taking place there, and it
Oh,
was it
yeah.
was every second day for I would say 3 to 4 months, and then talking to people that were down and doing the steel workers that were first responders. I get kind of emotional thinking like when I watch the footage, I get very, very emotional about it and just seeing it. But it was, I think, in one way, it was easier to be closer and be part of that than to be living in Florida, let's say, where it was, you were reading about it but not experiencing it because, we could see my mother. That when it was on the news here at 3 o'clock in the day, and my mother's like, "Turn off that. That looks like a silly movie." No, no, ma'am. They're after knocking the towers. Donald's in New York, so they
Yeah.
think he's
Yeah.
in New
Yeah. Yeah.
York.
Yeah. Yeah.
He must be dead, type thing.
Yeah.
But when you were there,
You have to, yeah, you're in it. Yeah, you have to wonder about it versus being
yeah,
there and having a
yeah,
sense of what's
you're
happening in
hearing
the
the
moment.
first-hand
Yeah.
accounts, which I'm very grateful to to experience. Not don't get me like obviously it was the worst of the worst, but there was a collective strength in New York that I was grateful to be part
Yes.
of. Resilience.
Yes. Yes. It is so interesting how we like the differences between us melt away
Mm.
very quickly in the face of tragedy. I remember I was working in a restaurant at the time, and I want to talk to you about the restaurant business shortly, but there's always that distinction between the front of the
Oh yeah.
house and the back of the house, the kitchen and the serving staff, and there's a disconnect and sometimes some tension between the two, and you rely on one another, and it creates fights, and it's them versus us. There's the spirit of that, and there, and oftentimes, uh, sometimes it's well, at least when I was working in the restaurant business and where I lived, they're often drawn like there's almost like
Hmm.
racial lines drawn between the front of the
Yeah.
house and the back of the house. And there were some people in the back of the house and that were Hispanic and African American, and the wait staff was primarily white, and that also added to the tension, I think. And that was back when I used to
Yeah.
smoke a lot of cigarettes
Me
at that time
too.
in my life in the restaurant business. It's a messy time. But I remember going to the back of the house right after 9/11, and we were just talking about it, and that tension between us was
Mm.
gone. And I remember one of his name
Wow.
was Ricky. He was a cook. He was a line cook. And this guy Ricky, he said to me, you know, I'm American
Mm.
first. I never would have heard that
Mm.
beforehand. I'm American first, and there was this coming together and this
Mm.
anger that we all
Yeah.
tapped into
Yeah.
against. I mean, there's a lot of confusions about who it was. I mean, the Arab at that point, it was the Arab
Hmm.
part of the world. It was the Muslim part of the world. There weren't distinctions
Yeah.
between, it was just a gut reaction. There's a visceral
Mm.
reaction out of fear. There wasn't distinctions between, um, innocent people from that region of the world and terrorist
Hmm.
organizations, or even government versus terrorist organizations. Uh, but we all kind of came together in a spirit uh, of anger at the injustice, which is an appropriate response to injustice. Anger is appropriate, and we all came together, and the differences were gone, and you really saw, as you said, this kind of collective
Yeah.
American strength. It wasn't just
Yeah.
in New York. I mean, I think it fueled the
Oh,
whole war.
yeah.
I mean, that energy fueled the whole war of us going to Iraq
hundred
ultimately.
percent, 100%, and yeah, it was an American story, true and true, in the most iconic city in America. Like it just, to the outside world, like New York is a lot of they're surprised when they go outside New York that there's a country outside of there. But yeah,
Yeah,
it
it's very yeah.
was. You know what? It just reminds me of again. I use the word resilience. The American people themselves are just they're amazing people. Like they just the Star Spangled Banner, the collective. They'll do each
The
other, but
patriotism.
they're like cousins. You know, you can talk about. I can
Yeah.
say it to my cousin, but you can't say it about my cousin. That's the
Yeah.
thing.
Yes. That's a great way to put it. From what I understand, there aren't Irish homes where the Irish flag is being waved out in front of the home, right?
There are, yeah. We have.
A little bit. Well, maybe I'm thinking I have a friend from London, and he always remarks on how many American flags wave in this country because there aren't a lot of British flags out in
Yeah.
front of homes. That's not true of Ireland.
There are, but not in like America. The patriotism in America is insane.
Yeah,
It's phenomenal.
yeah,
You know, like you
it's
just
real.
don't. Like
Yeah,
and we'll talk about the bar business, but you don't, and you don't knock another man's patriotism. You don't knock his country. You know, it's just
well,
wrong.
well, well. In the last 5 years, 5 or 6 years, that's been another source of tension too. What does it mean to be
Yeah.
American? And you have the athletes not standing for the national anthem, and then people having the outrage in response to that, and it's America's it's cracking in a
From
way.
the inside out, and that's if you ever wanted to, dismantle a country, that's kind of how you do it, and that you can't you see that there's so much focus on the negativity, on the pain, on the hurt, instead of
Yeah,
coming together. What can we do? What's the right thing? The finger pointing is heartbreaking, really, really is.
yeah, yeah. And I wonder if we've seen this in American history too, where the country, in a certain sense, was rescued by
Hmm.
a war.
Yeah.
I mean, the Great Depression was ended by
Hmm.
a war.
Hmm.
And there is something about us of Americans coming together in the face of a
Hmm.
known enemy,
Yeah.
So I wonder if of all the cracking from within, as you're saying, would be attended to or healed or sealed up with if there was actually some kind of real threat to the America as a
Yeah,
nation.
you'd
You know,
imagine Americans would band together, but the amount of information, misinformation now, and conspiracy theories, and you go
yes,
on Instagram or any of those, and like it's 50%. If you were to spend an hour on it, you'd have two different mindsets of what is the truth. Like you're going,
and they can't possibly both be true, right? Because they're so far away
so
from one
far,
another.
and they're so outlandish, they almost become believable. It's
Hmm.
how could somebody come? It's like I think a media blackout might be a great thing for a year. Maybe an election year would be a good year to do it.
A social media or just
A
media?
bit
Maybe
of
both.
both. Like I see it over here. Like the media
Yeah.
is biased across the world. Like and now there's just so much information coming from all other parts of the world and all that. Like I work in sustainability, and we see, you know, the logic has gone out of it. It really, really is.
Yeah.
But you know, as people, I think if you live internally with your family, your faith, all that, that's where you really can make a difference in your community out. That's
Yeah.
that.
Definitely. All right. So, well, let's start talking about the bar
Yeah.
life and the pub life, and we should probably begin. Uh, well, you got to
That is
sustain.
sustainable.
Um, tell 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 me tell me about the shirt you're wearing because that's a
This is my favorite. So this is from Glenbuck Brewery in New Jersey. I don't know if you can see it somewhere. My
okay.
friend is,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
it's
Looks
in
great.
Morristown, New Jersey. My friend Darren, he actually designed this T-shirt, but he himself and his cousin started a brewery up there, and they've won a ton of awards, and they're living the life. But it's really and it's just a brilliant American story about a little bit of creativity, a little bit of ingenuity, following his passion, and taking something special to their hometown. So yeah, and to do great beer. So
That's great. So now you worked in what sort of restaurants did you work in when you came there? When you came here, were these
Yeah.
pubs, Irish pubs, or were they clubs? Oh, okay, they were pubs. Yeah, I imagine it wasn't tough to get a job for you with the
No, well, I
Irish
had
trade.
connections. So, that's how I ended up in New York. I had
Mm.
connections in there. I ended up working in Irish bars, shocker. So it was, I think all in all, I was in New York for 5 years. So the last
Yeah.
bar I was with was called Connolly's. There's a group of them there around Midtown Manhattan. Fantastic people, great bars, restaurants. Just met so many good people through that. And from there, I
Wow.
went down to Florida and ended up working, eventually becoming a partner in a bar called McSorley's. We named it after the oldest bar in Manhattan. And, we
Hmm.
opened that in 2004, and I was involved in it till 2016, I think. I sold up in my.
Oh,
Yeah, it
successful
was a
run.
great run, and I went through a couple of different facelifts, and obviously I met Trina there.
Yeah.
So my life, as I know it now, grew from the bar. In reality, um,
Yeah. Yeah, it's an important chapter in your life. Uh, there is something about the Irish pub, I think, that is, we were talking earlier about the welcoming nature of the Irish culture. There's something about the Irish pub which feels
yeah,
homish, feels not homely, but home-ish. Feels like you're walking in to a place where you can really kind of let your
yeah,
hair down, relax, put your feet up, kick back
yeah,
with friends.
and
That's all Irish
well,
pubs, isn't it?
I feel it is, but that's just been my experience. Like I always seek out an Irish pub, and I my philosophy was always when you come into the bar, your life is outside the bar, but the bar is your sanctuary. You're coming in here. You're
Hmm.
maybe you need to offload some of your problems, but in general, it's our job to make sure that your day at this point begins here. You're in here to socialize, be with your friends or people you haven't met yet. Maybe you want to be that silent person, and you go up. When I introduce myself to somebody, you can okay, they either want to talk or they don't want to talk, or maybe they want to be introduced. Maybe you feel that what, maybe Johnny over here might do well with being introduced to Johnny over on the other side of the bar. That kind of
Oh, would you facilitate
thing.
those kinds of relationships in
Yeah,
the bar?
if you know what, you'd start a conversation, you'd find a connection point. Because if two people are enjoying each other's company, the whole bar is an atmosphere. It's an idea more than a physical place. It's about creating
Yes.
this feeling amongst people. That's good for business. You know what?
Hmm.
The more people, if you can create an atmosphere where people will enjoy themselves, want to come back, create a feeling, an emotion. You know what? Yeah, they'll
Mm.
come back day in, day out, year in, year out, because that's where it was created. So yeah.
Yeah. I think within me, and I don't know if this is a common feeling, but um, I do have an attraction to
Mhm.
life at the bar. I spend some times at the pub and at the bar growing up, but there is a feeling that it has a shelf life that you sort of
Mhm.
age out of it, um, or if you don't age out of it, it's a problem. Where it's like I would love just hearing you talk about it right now. I'm like, I should go down and get a pint myself, like it is attractive. But what that means though is that I'm not home with the family. And I think that there is this idea that pub life and alcohol in general can take you away from your family life responsibilities. If you work all day and instead of going home, you spend a few hours at the pub, well then their kids aren't getting
Correct,
their dad, are
correct.
they?
And it's
Yeah.
there's a trade off in life in everything. And there was a point in the pub where you started to see that, and it didn't feel good. You're going, oh, this.
Yeah.
I know. You've got kids now. You got to get home. Yeah,
Yeah.
the social aspect
Yeah.
has gone out of it. Um, and for me
Yeah.
personally, I got out of business because when I was going to the kids' matches next day, I wasn't there. I was just the zombie because I was tired. And the good feeling of that I left me, I think, in my 30s. You know, I kind of got out really the bar business at the point where, you know, if you see a couple of grey hairs coming in, and the kids are coming, priorities have changed, I guess. But on the other side, you know,
Yes.
I was at a funeral. I go to a lot of funerals. I'm in Ireland. We do a lot of funerals. I was at a funeral
Yeah.
on last Thursday. You know, and it was, you know, it wasn't. It was an older woman. She's older now, but we, you know, would have grown up with her kids. I actually was a mass server at her husband's funeral, and my son was the mass server at her funeral. But we went to the pub afterwards,
Yeah.
and that was a great. You know, everybody's
Yeah.
in there. You know, just having a few pints and catching up. You know, a friend of mine I hadn't seen, lived in the UK for the
Yeah.
last 20 years. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a necessity, but if it's a crutch, it's a problem.
Yeah, it's true. I think too, I mean, you talked about the social aspect of it. I mean, there's the social dimension if you go to the pub, but if you work, I mean, it automatically
Oh
gives you
yeah,
a social life. I mean, if you were, I mean, whether it's with other staff members, there's this old subculture. These people, and at least in America, it's like this restaurant's people are friends
yeah,
with these restaurants people. There's the restaurant people that have
yes,
Mondays off. You know, they don't have Saturdays off; they have Mondays off, and so Mondays is when everybody socializes together and
yeah,
goes to a different pub. You know, so I think I was very appreciative of the fact that it gave me a social life at a
mm,
young age. Um, I'm acutely aware of the dangers of that social life. I mean, it's pretty heavy
yeah,
partying, isn't it? And that was all great, but I think I started to age out of working in that business. I put myself through college, through graduate school. I was always had one foot in the
yeah,
door of the restaurant business all the way through. Was when I got to my late 20s, early 30s, I started to realize that the way patrons, at least the ones that I was working with, I actually did work in an Irish
yeah,
pub. I'd mentioned you. I worked at a very famous one in DC
yeah.
called the Dubliner, very
Been there.
famous pub. And this might just have been reflective of the clientele there and the types of people that went there. But I remember thinking to myself, you can't talk to me
Mm,
that way. You know, and I didn't feel that way when I was young. If someone disrespected me, it was like, okay, you know, it's just a kid.
yeah,
I didn't know any better. But when I became more of an adult, it's like I'm an adult and I know it's not okay to treat
yeah,
people like that. You know, the sense of entitlement, the rudeness, not seeing the server as a
mm,
person. I mean, I'll tell you, if someone's
yeah,
difficult, you know, if they ask for mustard and I go and get mustard and they come back and then they ask
mm,
for peppers and then I go and they come back and, oh, I'm sorry, I want to change my order. And, oh, can you do this special thing with the drink? And they have all these things which
yeah,
make your life harder as a server. That's all fine if they acknowledge
yeah,
that it's difficult. If they say, listen, I know
mm,
this is a pain, but can I have an
yeah,
extra pickle? You know,
yeah,
sure,
yeah,
absolutely. Versus and
yeah,
an extra
yeah.
pickle.
There,
You know, and I just became more sensitive to that latter attitude the
yeah.
older I got. Did you feel that way? Like the people became more difficult, the patrons?
Yeah, in a certain sense, like by the time by the time I was in my 30s, I was a part owner. So, you know, there was a little different way in which I could manage the customer. Like I had the you know, this is my place now. I
The
have
power,
the
the
authority.
authority. You had the
That's the way
authority.
about
Yeah.
like I definitely would have felt that, and it's the entitlement thing that really gets you.
Mm.
Just because it's a very very tough game, it's exhausting. You're working long hours. The demands, it goes from being very quiet to very busy. You're
The
dealing with
pace, yeah. The
stress, the
stress, yeah.
public. You go into the kitchen, and you know yourself. I wasn't getting the pickle. It was now I have to go back into the kitchen to say to the guy behind the line, I need a pickle. Now he's going to give it to you in the
Yes.
ear. Now we have to go out to the customer, and the fact that that's not
Yes.
acknowledged is time to you know, it just leaves a bad taste. It's taken away from your
Yeah.
person now, your dignity, and you're going like,
Yes. Yes. As I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, my psychologist hat is always on, and I'm wondering what the entitlement of the patron is all about. And I'm wondering if, the old, like in our adult lives, as a as a you're a father and a husband, and you have a career. Very, very few places in my life now am I
Mm.
served.
Mm.
No, where someone just takes care of
Mm.
whatever I
Yeah.
want them to. Like one of those very few places
Yeah.
is the restaurant. When someone cooks it for me, they clean up my dishes, they get me more drinks. That reminds me, the only other time in one's life where that's a real part of your life is when
Fact.
you're a child.
Yeah.
And your parents are doing that for you. So I wonder if there's like almost like, and then when you're a child, you don't think of it. You don't even think of your parents
Fact.
as people, as
Yeah.
having
Yeah. They
their
live
own
to serve
needs.
us. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder if it's almost like it's like a regressing back to those earlier years sometimes, if you're
Yeah.
not careful, when you go out to eat or you go out to have a drink.
Yeah.
It's like you go back into your childhood a bit. And so the
Yeah.
entitlement comes
I've seen
back.
a few big babies. All right. When I was, it's also, you know what? And I've seen a lot. People, that middle ground, let's say that new money, that, or that people that grew up on title, that
Mm,
literally didn't, they weren't brought up properly, for want of a better word. They weren't, mommy and daddy
yeah,
didn't teach them right from wrong. They are very
that's right.
difficult people. But if they're difficult to the server, and this is what I always I said, oh, I don't have to go home with these people. They're, if
Mm,
a leopard doesn't change, it's they're going to be like that with their other half. Or like, I would have empathy by the time I'm done. That's what I kind of used to get into my head. It's like, oh Jesus, I just have to deal with you for 2 minutes, and you know what? You're going to give me 20% plus whatever else on top of it. So, you know.
Donal, you'd make a brilliant therapist. This is one of the lessons I learned when I was going
Mm.
through my training. Was that if you're dealing with a client who's
Yeah,
a challenge, who's difficult, who's blaming you for their problems, they're attacking you,
yeah,
like this kind of thing happens. It's because it's what you pointed to. It's because they're hurt. It's not about you, and however hard it is for you as a therapist, it's 1,000 times worse because they have to
yeah,
live with
dude.
themselves and they have to take the way they're treating you with them wherever they go. And that does elicit compassion and empathy. It helps you deal
Yeah.
with them when they're difficult. I mean, you picked that up, that insight and wisdom on no wonder your name is Donal, ruler of the
Ruler.
wise, just in the pub. To be honest, though, it comes to my mind now that I think I did learn some clinical skills just from
Yeah,
working in the pub.
you do. You have to take a step back and go, right. Again, our job in the bars, and I say it was kind of take it in to send them out a little bit better, but you don't take their shit. Excuse my, you don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're
Totally.
not there to take it, but you just have to be aware of it. That was always one thing.
Yeah. That's great. All right. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about psychology and religion, which is what I do professionally. I try and integrate those things, and I know you have an interest in these topics. And now this is all secondhand. I've heard these types of thoughts from your wife, so I want to hear from
Yeah,
you
lovely.
directly. But from what I understand, this is the narrative. Hopefully, I'm not causing a fight or something with you and your wife. I doubt it. But um, what she has told me about your experience is that you grew up with a very specific type of
Mhm.
Catholicism, which in some ways drew you away from religion,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
your your experience more recently with what Catholic
Yeah,
psych offers, which is where I work, is very different than what you learned and is of greater interest and attraction
absolutely.
to you. Is that true? Can you talk
Yeah,
about that?
we grew up very Catholic country. We it was mass every Sunday. Very. Uh,
Yeah.
removed from reality mass, and even still going to, like, you're trying to focus in the homilies and the gospel, and I don't. But where does this connect with my life? It's more ritualistic than anything else, and we're being made to go. So by the time I was, able to go to a different church than my parents, different mass,
Yeah.
I'd sit out in the
Yeah.
car and smoke cigarettes, and then we'd go into the church and pick up the leaflet to prove that we were in mass. So it was, but I was always very much into religion. Like, it was I have two uncles that are priests and an auntie, a nun. It was a big part of our life. Growing up, we'd go up to my uncle's house and we'd sit down to the decade of the rosary. It was. But
Oh yeah.
it was religion without context, I feel, or without you know
Hmm.
reaching into the deeper parts of us, the curious parts of us. That, okay, what happens? What's where do we go after we die, or where's the ins and outs? And then of course yeah.
So it was more it was more ritualistic
Very much
almost.
so. Well, it was, the priest was here, or the brothers, depending. I went to a De La Salle, their word was gospel, that couldn't be questioned, and yeah, you had the
Literally.
authoritarians.
Yeah.
It was,
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I've had
Yes.
nothing but great experience with priests. Like, there's not, it's all Catholic Church, and,
Yeah.
the sex abuse and this, that, and the other. And there was so much of that. Zero bad experience on my side. As I say, the Father Dowling, that was our priest. He used to just crack us up. Great.
Great man.
Just,
Yeah. Oh, the
and my
funniest. Yeah.
uncles, just great people. So, the Catholic,
Yeah.
the priests and the nuns that I knew, yeah, but it was just there weren't. There was no way they connected with me or with the youth. How could they?
Yes.
How could they talk
Yeah.
to us in a language that was literally a foreign language to us? So, it was very
Yeah. It was in
well.
Latin.
No, it
Was it?
wasn't. It wasn't Latin, but you read the Bible and it's like I have to read that line 6 times to get, and it just doesn't have
Yeah.
context. It doesn't.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And then, like, Catholic psych obviously came into my life through Trina, which has been a real, it's a genius idea, number one, and just the genuineness of it, and obviously I'm hearing it more from Trina than I'm experiencing it myself personally. But I just see everything you do there just blowing me away. Just how it should be, and how it can help
Mm.
people, and how aligned with the modern world it is, having the principles behind it. So I think it's really
Mm.
exciting. I think the service that Dr. Greg and yourself are providing is immeasurable. Changing people's lives.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is the earlier expression of your faith didn't include the psychology.
Oh, zero. The word
Yeah.
psychology didn't
It
exist
didn't
in the psychology. You crazy?
in the
Oh,
church.
sorry.
Yeah.
Um, Freudian slip. Uh, uh,
I might be.
that's why I like it.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think there is something really valuable in meeting people where they are. And we can have teachings of the Catholic faith and believe them to be true on faith if we believe them by faith. But we can lose their validity if uh, we don't see where we are or meet people where they are and help guide them to those truths, and then to understand if there is a discrepancy between those things, why there's a discrepancy, because the discrepancy isn't necessarily abstract statements. It's this doesn't feel in my
Mm,
life like this is true. And let's explore why or
mm,
why not. What are the obstacles that are preventing me from believing this? And this is all
yeah,
psychology.
it's the teachings are so solid. The teachings are, but they haven't been. The modern person's attention span is so short. They don't have time to sit back and
Mm.
contemplate the the depth of it.
Yes.
And I think this is one of the hardest parts for and it's where the Catholic Church is really, really struggling with that, getting up to the modern world to be relevant. Like I look, we were at mass the other day, and I looked down across the church, a small country church there, Newtown. You can Google Earth it just to get a concept of where it is, St. Patrick's. And when I
Yeah.
grew up, every one of those pews to nobody sat in the top one, but every one of those pews was full. And now,
Yeah.
it's you could swing a cat around the place and you wouldn't touch anyone. So it's a now.
Well, that's a famous Irish
Yeah,
sport, cat swinging.
lots of prizes, but we're missing it. Like we grew up as a community, and now that was an
Yeah.
essential part of our community, for better or worse, and now that's missing. There's a gap.
Yeah, you make a good point, and I think I've talked to different guests on the show, which highlight both sides of that thing. One is the church needs to modernize in a way that people that are can identify with, and that people can access. And uh, you know, I, when we have in where I live, we have a lot of older priests who, really have yet to pick up a cell
Yeah,
phone.
yeah,
So for them to give a
mm,
20-minute homily in the style that they learned when they were in seminary 40 years ago
yeah,
is all they know, right? And so in one sense you can say that the priest needs to modernize a bit, or we need younger priests that understand the world today and realize that actually probably a 5-minute
mm,
homily will stick with someone given today's
yeah,
attention span, and to offer some charisma and make it real and pull the scripture in and talk about how that relates to their life and be a bit more dynamic. That's on one hand. So it's the church finding its way to meet people where they are. On the other hand, this show is designed to slow people
mm,
down. It's a long conversation. It's long form
mm,
content. And things emerge when we give ourselves a lot of space to just be together.
yeah,
Right now, I might have to take this show and
mm,
clip it up into shorts and highlights and stuff, so people consume it the way they are accustomed to consume things. But I want that to
mm,
be a funnel. If I put a short up, if you say something as you're accustomed to do that's hilarious and it's 30 seconds long,
mm,
great. But I don't want that to be the entirety of what they consume. I want them to think, wow, I wonder what the
yeah,
rest of that conversation was like. Maybe I'll sit down. Maybe I'll carve some time. And then selfishly, uh, I use this as a time to hang out with people because I don't have any time. I kind of combine my work life and my social life. I'm an extrovert too. I
yeah,
don't work in the bar anymore. I use this as an opportunity to sort of just hang out and be with others. Because I mean, how often do we just carve out a couple hours to just
yeah,
be with people? It's very rare. And when I get to this
mm,
portion of the conversation where we talk about faith and psychology, I mean, I've had guests who said, you know, I haven't thought about that
mm,
before. Because as you said, you just don't take the time to
yeah,
sit down and think and
yeah.
reflect and go deep and talk about
And
these things.
I think you know there, there's a lot of focus on meditation apps, and I do a lot of them. Like what you're doing is so important, in that the meditation needs to be relevant to your life and your experience, your religion. So you do. I think a lot of people realize that they need to put the brakes on and relax and kind of get mindful, but how do you help them in that through the lens that they you know I went to mass all my life, and I couldn't tell you one gospel that stuck out to me. How do
Yeah.
you how do you bring that in, so you have that, all that, okay, I have 20 minutes here, okay, here's my problem, this meditation followed by the gospel, to give the I think it's connecting back,
Yeah.
and the other aspect to it too is community. birds of a feather always will flock together.
Yes.
So it doesn't mean that
Yeah.
if you're from a different religion, you are like you're still a different community, but your core beliefs are the same. Our beliefs are based in Catholic teachings, obviously, but so
Yeah.
the community needs to be strong together,
Yeah.
with a common
Yes.
purpose, common goal. It, I think there's been just too much emphasis on pain and hurt, and within the Catholic I grew up.
Within the
Yeah.
Catholic faith. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think so. And I think, something I love is implicit Catholic faith, implicit Catholicism, implicit
Mm.
Christ. I have a series on this channel about
Mm.
Tolkien. And I think Tolkien was the master at talking about Jesus for, what amounts to 4 books without ever saying the name Jesus, but he was talking about Christ
Yes.
the entire time. Right. And so I think connecting with people in this life on things that aren't explicitly religious, or at least add that alongside the explicit religious
Mm.
discussion, creates something much more attractive.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This show, I have a sandwich here in this show. It's let's talk about your life. Let's talk a little bit about this, and then let's talk about the movie. Right? I'm not the type of person that's gonna, just watch a Catholic movie or read the Bible on a Friday night. Like
Yeah.
there's a place for that, but I don't think that's where most people are. And if you want to bring in community, I think you have to catch their
Have to
gaze.
catch their.
You have to use the modern tools, the modern sensibilities to catch their gaze and invite them into a discussion of
Yeah.
something deeper, which they're actually longing for. If you like Lord of the Rings, you're actually longing for Christ, But if I say you're longing for Christ
Yeah.
as a lead-in, nobody wants to hear that, right?
I could see you. Yeah, I don't know if you ever seen Father Ted. Like I could see you outside the movie theater with.
With the big sign.
Lord of the Rings, you're longing for Christ.
Well, what's funny about that is those people, we have this association of them being,
Yeah.
mentally disturbed. It's the people who are, the poor, it's the homeless, it's the mentally disturbed people. Those are the ones out in the street that are explicitly saying, Jesus is your savior, or the end of the world is coming. And we just dismiss that as crazy. So if we naturally do that, then if we're going to present that message, it has to be sandwiched or couched or packaged in a way that's attractive.
Yes, so good. It's so interesting. The Lord of the Rings is obviously my other movie is we're going to talk about, but I just bought Lord of the Rings again the other day.
Yeah.
I love that movie. I love Tolkien. Yeah,
So good. Good.
But I'm attracted to it because of that. That is the reason when you put it exactly like that. And same with Lewis. It's good, solid Christ teaching,
but it's not in your
and
face.
that's where the Catholic Church went wrong, in my opinion, in Ireland. The too much in your face, too much fire and brimstone. And then on the other side, you had the abuse scandals, and there's an old saying like you can if you go to get the name for being an early riser, and you can sleep all day. So the second you lose your reputation, you're gone. So get the name for being an early riser, you can sleep all day. So the second you lose your credibility, there's no coming back from it.
What are you? So, do you work on yourself? Do you consciously work on yourself? If so, what are you working on in yourself right now? Psychologically or spiritually or anything else? Like what in terms of your own personal development? What are you?
So I keep to consistency is something I think we all struggle with, but I've been a lot more consistent in my personal development. I do. I followed Wim Hof about 4 years ago. I read his book, and so I every morning now I do my Wim Hof breathing, my cold shower, my push-ups. without fail. So that would be one thing.
You do the cold shower
Yeah,
every
well, it's
day.
partly because that's actually how the heating system works in our house. But now I've got so used to it, so
You're a
you
brave
know what?
man.
It's such a weird thing. You get in now. I mean to say it's winter here now, so when that shower hits you for 2 minutes, you know it.
Whew.
But now I'm not happy unless it's freezing more because I just the endorphins kick in. I feel so good. So I do 3 rounds of the Wim Hof breathing. I have the app on my phone. Then I do a round of push-ups
Yeah.
or some other exercise. Um, normally do like a 20-minute yoga a day, just off some YouTube thing, and but the cold shower every morning. So
Yeah.
I reckon by 6:30 I have a lot done in my day, so that takes like 25-30 minutes. So I'm okay, I've done that. But the key to it is consistency. And from that, you breed other good
Yeah.
habits. Okay, I've done this. I can do this.
Yeah.
I started a copywriting course lately. I just love that. I love writing. I love kind of the psychology.
Yeah.
So that action. But I'm always listening and reading books on self development and personal improvement, things like that, and business. I love it.
That's awesome. That's so cool. All right, let's talk about Miller's Crossing.
Let that dangle. Take your flunky and dangle. Huh? Now let me ask you because I hadn't seen it in a while. I love that. Like as the Coen brothers are one of the best movie makers in my opinion ever. They're just out there, brilliant.
Yes.
But Miller's Crossing, I think, is their best movie by a country mile, and not only because it's got that Irish connotation, but got the Irish, got the Italians. You have the hitmen are gay, which is never really talked about in it. It's just implied. The dialogue is unbelievably sharp, and like it's one of those movies that you watch it the first time, but that's good. You watch the second, ooh. By the third time you watch that film, you go, "This is so clever. It is so clever." It's to do with loyalty. Casper talks about ethics. What did you think of it?
Yes. I liked it. I did like the film. It's certainly as I was watching, I couldn't help but think that it was almost. I mean, it's tough to know because when in the older films, it's tough to put yourself in the historical context of when that movie came out and what that movie meant for that time of filmmaking, and how it seems to me that in some ways broke from what was going on and gained some notoriety because there was a uniqueness to it, but also it seemed like it harkened back to almost like a noir style crime film with the one-liners. As you said, the dialogue was fantastic. But the one-liners were just like sharp and poignant and it's just like a mic drop and the scene would end. So the way that I really enjoyed the way the characters spoke to one another.
There was no. It's just one of those films that they don't really make commercially. There's no way to make that film. It was funny. I enjoyed it more when I was younger. I think I appreciate it now when I watch it. Yes, but it's violent, but in kind of that shocking way. But I think the characters, between Gabriel Byrne's character, Tom, and Tommy, and his boss, like the way he's still, even though spoiler alert, at the very end, it's like we're done. But he did everything to make sure that Leo stayed on top without Leo knowing it. It was.
Yeah, they had such an interesting dynamic. The first scene with oh no, I can't remember his name.
Gabriel Byrne.
The Italian Casper, yes. The opening scene with Casper.
I had.
And I mean, and he is obviously very funny. And the ironic part of his character is he's talking about ethics when he's a mobster who murders people, right? Like there's an extent to his ethics, But when you first see him talking to Leo,
Yeah.
the Irish mob boss, and you see, I mean, he's just in that first scene, he's a cold-blooded badass,
Yeah.
Leo. And then he leaves.
Yeah.
Casper leaves. And Leo becomes a different person. Immediately, you see him sort of like his weakness emerge very, very quickly. And you see that the real kind of tough guy, cold-blooded, calculating person isn't the number one, it's the number two. It's like the number one is a bit of a puppet. He's a mouthpiece. Leo's a mouthpiece who's got his own ego. But I mean, really, the power behind the throne, the neck of the head, is Tommy's character. And he's almost intimidated, a little scared of him until his ego gets threatened, and then he asserts himself. But it was funny to see the front he placed with Casper.
Yeah, and Tommy just sits back, doesn't say a word. He's non-involved, even though he thinks it's a bad idea. He's not going to. So it's kind of the Robert Greene, the 12 Principles. Read those Robert Greene books. Phenomenal books.
No.
The rule number I think it's the 12 Principles of Power. It's like rule number 1 is never outshine your boss. And it's the 12 laws of power. For not like you need to read those. They're as good as
yeah.
But that's Tommy's character. Never outshine your boss. But you control the power and just the psychology of the whole film. I think is just really, the dynamics are so good.
Yeah, and then there's a parallel on the Italian side. It's the same thing.
Yeah,
with Dane.
And Dane is doing everything. Really Tommy just outplays Dane.
Right, but the whole thing is a battle between Dane and Tommy. It's not between Leo and Casper. I mean, they're both kind of caricatures, like loud mouthpieces. But you almost wonder. I think of when you compare this to The Godfather, where the difference is that the Tommy character is Michael Corleone. Where he's actually the boss. He's not like, or Peaky Blinders with Tommy and Peaky Blinders. Like the mob leader is actually the cold and calculating one who's the one in control. This movie has those as the number 2 positions, which is very, very interesting.
It's one of those films, unless it was kind of presented to you, you wouldn't watch it. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to be on anybody's list. It's not coming on the TV. Like you're bombarded with so much entertainment right now, and it's little. I think the lessons in that film, and you will watch it again. It's like I watched one of my other favorites, is Groundhog Day. I watched that on a flight over last week.
Well, that's funny. You watch it over and over. Over Groundhog Day. That's what the movie is. Yeah.
Life imitating art, but it's such a good message in that film. Or, Laura, or the other one, Last Mohicans. Like these are such good, great filmmaking without CGI, without being manipulated, without every character having to fit into the whole PC world that we live in right now, where you need a broad spectrum of every possible politically correct character in there, which adds nothing to the story. I'd watch any movie as long as they stick to what the story is. We don't have to be with everything for everyone.
Yeah, you don't want it to feel forced. A lot of films, you don't want to have characters forced into meet some kind of agenda. It just make the film, regardless of who the characters are. So tell me a little bit more what your feelings are on Tommy. I mean, Tommy, he was cold and calculating and brilliant, and as Leo said, it was a good play, but there's a bit of luck too. There's a bit of luck of the Irish. He almost died on several occasions, out of his control.
But isn't that fate more than anything else? Like, we can't live in this cushioned life. Like, you can't be successful without, sticking your head out a little bit. There is risk in everything you do. getting married is as much of a risk as staying single. Having children is as much a risk not going into business. You take a bigger risk, in my opinion, by
Yes.
playing it safe. Um,
Yeah. Yes.
anybody of any success that I've known has taken risks, but more than that, they're leaving a good story behind. Like we're all going to be dead in,
Yeah.
what am I, 47? Maybe 40 years, maybe a lot less. Between now and 40 years, I'm going to be dead. Um, you ask
Yeah.
any of my kids now, who's Michael Jackson? They go, I don't know. He was the biggest
Yeah. It's
star in the
crazy.
world. You couldn't go, like when I grew up, as big as it gets. Now the biggest star in the world is a footnote in history.
Taylor
You know.
Swift.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
where are
Yeah,
we
right.
where
Right.
are
Right.
we going to
Now
end
it's
up?
Taylor
Where are we
Swift.
going to end up in
Sure.
the memory thing? So take a bit of a risk. You might get lucky. You might get your teeth knocked in.
Right.
Tell me.
Yeah. Do you think so? His you mentioned earlier. There's a loyalty theme in
Mm.
all of this. Do you think that was culturally based? Do you think that was ethnically based? Do you think that he stayed
Yeah.
loyal to Leo just because of the Irish part of it?
Yeah, I'd say that had there again. It goes back to birds of a feather will stick together, and there is something that
Yeah.
goes back. We both have it. It's innate. There's people we grew up with that even if we didn't, there mightn't be great people now, or they're not, but they're still my buddy. They're still my buddy. You don't
Yeah.
talk about. It was like I think Casper does now, or is it Tommy? Said no, sorry, it's Leo says the line says I don't like my friends badmouthed even by my other friends. I love that
Yeah.
line. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think even
Yeah.
more than ethnicity, like history.
Do you think there was this play between him and
Mm.
Bernie about whether or not he has a heart? Do you think Tommy had a heart or he didn't have
Oh,
a
I
heart?
think he had a heart, and I think Bernie is evil incarnate. I think he's the one
Ah,
that everything was going fine until Bernie Birnbaum, the character, just he goes he
and Tommy
stirred it
knew it.
up. He stirred
Tommy knew it from the beginning. He recommended to Leo,
get
like,
rid of him,
just whack him.
get rid of him, and he
Yeah.
was, and even Leo, because I think the reason he didn't jump, number one, he wasn't a killer, but number two, he was in love with his sister Verna,
Verna. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he had that little bit of a heart, but I think Bernie thought he was smarter than Tommy, and no, that was he did what needed to be done. He
Yes.
did exactly what needed to be done.
Yeah. I mean, the betrayal of Tommy letting him
Yeah,
live. And then he turned that around
yeah,
and twisted it on him and tries to use it
yeah,
against him and to control him. I mean, that was awful.
yeah.
And then you see that, and you see him in the woods on his knees. I'm praying to you, have a heart. I'm praying to you, have a heart. And
Mm.
so he doesn't kill him. And then later on,
Have a
same
heart.
replay of the same thing. Have a heart, Tommy. And he says, "What heart?
Yeah.
I don't have a heart." Boom.
Well, I,
But he had a heart. I think he was driven by some kind of distorted sense of moral good because, like we said, with Casper talking about ethics and
mm,
he murders people, like we're looking for ethics or trust or goodness or virtue in a world built on
yeah,
crime. The opening scene, Casper saying, "This isn't right. This isn't right. He's taking my money away when I'm trying to fix
yeah.
these fights.
It's like you can't make a movie.
You're fixing the fights."
It's so
you
good.
know, yeah. It's like they're all living in an
Yeah,
illusion in a way. It's like they're still striving for. There's like good guys and bad guys in a
yeah,
bad world. The whole world is messed
yeah.
up.
And I think it's interesting that the one thing about Bernie in that film, you don't change people. People have to change.
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
here's a typical example. Tommy let him live. Okay, he let him live, expecting him to change, but you don't change people. You know, and that was the lesson that came back. I think, okay, the penny dropped. I didn't change him. Now I have to get rid of him. He's not going to change. Unless it's probably the most difficult thing in the world is change people. It's probably you
You
can't.
can't.
Yeah,
That's my job. it's my job to know that I
Can't
can't change
change
anyone.
anybody. You can guide them, help them change themselves.
Yeah,
But,
if they
and
want to
that's Bernie.
change.
Bernie got a new lease of life. You give
Yeah,
him a new lease of life. If you give him $1 million there, he'd still come back to be the person that he turned out to be. Yeah.
it's true. Yeah, and I think of as you're talking, I keep thinking of the complexity of the character of Casper, who he would kind of backstab even
Mm.
Tommy at times, and then Tommy would come to the office
Yeah.
and he'd say, "Yeah,
Yeah.
no hard feelings," and Tommy would just like take him back in, and they'd act like he didn't have him, you know, like a threat on his life to kill him, or bring him out to the woods to make sure he wasn't lying, or they had him beat him up like in the first scene when he wouldn't take his money, and he was just so complicated. And then there's something very interesting about when his
Mm.
boy came in,
Yeah.
Casper's boy came in,
Yeah.
and a kid was whining, and he
Yeah.
slapped him, and then he said, take a page out of his book and stop whining so much, and then
Yeah.
he just hugged him and kissed him and say, "Oh, did
Yeah.
someone hit you?" It's like, you hit him. Like the inconsistencies in
Yeah.
that character.
Every,
Ethics. You're a mob gangster. Like, what do
yeah.
you mean ethics? It's like we still strive for the good in our lives, even though we're living in a bad way.
It's, but you see it in everyday life. You see it in people. There's people you like or you respect, but they're also narcissistic and very overbearing. Like there's probably very few people that you say 100. Like if you were to be objective about anybody, you'd say, well, I don't like this part of his character. I do like this. But it's a bit like on a famous example, Elon Musk. Who the hell would want to be Elon Musk? Because he's completely nuts. But you kind of want to take the best of Elon Musk, which might be 15.5% of his personality, but you kind of there's a good like Casper. There was good. There's parts of him that is unbelievable good, but
Parts that
yeah,
are good.
and the
Yes.
movie in large, it was just a tough time, tough men. Everybody took it on the chin, didn't whine about it. Yeah,
Yes.
brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're making some good points. It reminds me of a Native American proverb, where about how there are two wolves
Mm.
inside of me. There's a good wolf and an evil wolf, and
Yeah.
they're fighting each other. And then the response is, which one will win? And the answer is the one that I
Mm.
feed. But it is the
Yeah.
battleground within each
Every
one of
one of
us.
us, and every one of us has it.
Yeah.
Every one of us has it, and we both have that kind of, who slapped you after you slap a moment. It's
Yeah.
it's part of our makeup, but it's not doing the slapping is where you control yourself.
Yeah. And it's a healthy way to look at people. It's a healthy way to look at people as a shade of gray, because when you do so, you also look at yourself that way. So if you
Mm-hmm.
accomplish something, you don't have that narcissistic temptation to say, I'm the greatest ever. You might say, I did a good job, but I
Yeah,
got some help. People helped me to do a great job. And then on the other hand, I messed up. That doesn't mean I'm the worst ever. It's,
yeah.
but I tried my best, right? To see those good
Or,
and
or,
and
or
and
asking
and
yourself,
bad qualities in others
did
and
I try
struggle.
my best? I think that's a better, like,
Sure.
I messed up, but did I try my best? If I did, there's no gap there, but I messed, stuff happens. But it's being able to,
Yeah.
it's the hardest part, I think, is to be objective in those things, like not to pat yourself too hard in the back, but not to hit yourself too hard over the head at the same time. Like you're 100% right in that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Um, what did you make of Tommy's decision to not rejoin with Leo at the end
Loved it.
after everything?
I loved it. I thought that
Hmm.
was, you know what, that separates a real movie from a Hollywood movie. That's real life. Okay, I did what I need to do. And I feel that that's the generation before me that I grew up with in Ireland. That's the way they are. They have their morals, their principles. But okay, I've done what I need to do. Now, good luck. Move on. The Irish goodbye.
And I'm
It's
moving
like I've
on.
done my
Yeah.
thing. I'm out. You know.
The
No,
Irish
no, no,
goodbye.
no regrets, but it's that level of, he didn't go for the easy option, which is sit beside Leo's side from now on. he's he'd probably be found dead by Lazard a couple of months afterwards for his gambling problem. Who knows? But
Right. Yeah, he's the hero, but he
yeah,
also has a gambling problem.
and he's a pride
Yeah.
problem, and I love that. I think that to me had him and Leo kissed and made up at the end would have ruined the movie. To me, that's not real life,
Yeah. Yeah. I think there was a real opportunity for him and Verna to love one another. I think there was something real between them.
They're most alike.
But they kept missing each other a little bit. And the final straw for him was when Leo said, yeah, Verna and I actually are getting married. After both of them knew how, like, he communicated to both of them at different points in the film how problematic that was. He said to Leo, she slept with me last night. Like, he said to Verna, like, you're just manipulating him to keep your brother safe. Like, they didn't have a real relationship. It was about, an exchange of power for sex. Yeah. That's what their relationship was. And Leo confusing himself into thinking that he loved her. And then I think when Tommy heard that, he said, okay, as you said, people don't change.
And, Verna and Tommy are probably very alike character-wise. So Leo probably, that's one side. Like, Tommy knew it would never work if she was on one side of Leo in his ear. And he was soft. Like, Leo was soft and a bit dumb. But Tommy, like, him and Verna were on the same plane. They understood the game.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point. And I wonder too, Tommy lost power in relation to Leo when Verna got involved. He stopped listening to Tommy when it was about, like, his, having sex with Verna because, she was basically wanted protection for her brother. And that's why he wouldn't do the right thing, the cold and calculating thing to protect, the organization. And so Tommy probably knew, like, if she's got your ear, then I don't even matter anymore. If she's going to trump me,
it's time to move on. Time to move on. It'd be very interesting to see where those characters, if they're obviously never be about where they end up. Like,
Yeah, I've been toying around with some ideas about the show, and if I ever get rich and famous, Donal, and I have big name celebrities on the show, I think what I would want to do is just what you mentioned, is to actually have famous actors conduct interviews
as their
in character.
I love that.
In their famous, like, if they can enter into it. I mean, I know it's hard, and there's a methodology, and each has their own process of entering into characters and acting. But imagine if some of the more gifted actors who can improv and get back into the headspace of those characters, so we can find out what happened afterwards.
That would be so good. I'd love to know what happened there.
Yeah.
Albert Finney, is Albert Finney still alive? I'm not sure. Like that, there's also there's two Irish actors there, Albert Finney and Gabriel Byrne, obviously. So that was always it.
Yeah, he was in Big Fish.
Well, he's famous over, like, Gabriel Byrne was a very famous Irish actor. He was in the Irish soaps over here. So yeah, we would have grown up with Gabriel Byrne. Then Albert Finney. He's I think he's a great actor. Great actor.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Irish goodbyes, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. It was really nice.
It was brilliant.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice talking with you. I'd love to have you on again. We'll pick a different film. We'll talk about far more than just the fact that you're Irish. I know you're not all. We have to lead with that because us, people see it. But I know there's a lot more to who you are than that. Yeah, the accent gives it away. But it's been a brilliant time with you.
Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure. God bless.
You too.